Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Welcome to the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. I'm your host, Julie Lyles Carr. I'm so glad you're here. You know, my twins, my babies, well, they are about to be officially adults. They're about to be 18 years old. And so while I am not in the thick of birthing myself these days, even though I've done a lot of births, I am getting to observe and be afresh with wonder at what all it takes to bring a baby into this world. One of my daughters has just recently had our second grandchild, and in helping and in being part of that experience and bringing the baby home, all the things. Like, how do we ever do this as women? Even though I've done it a bunch of times. So I was so excited when I heard about Rachel Taylor. Rachel, thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Now, before we jump in to all things birth and postpartum and all the stuff, introduce the listener to who you are, where you live, kids, dogs, cats, goldfish, all the stuff.
Yes, so I'm Rachel Taylor. I live out of Birmingham, Alabama. I'm a registered nurse here. I have been in labor and delivery, postpartum nursing, post-C-section nursing for the past 15 years plus by this point. I do a lot of childbirth education, spinning babies education as well. So just all hands on deck in the birth world is what I do. I have 3 children of my own, happily married. And let me think, pets. We do have backyard chickens. People are always surprised to hear about that. We don't look like we have backyard chickens at our home, but we do. They're hidden back there. And I love to bake, love to make sourdough bread, just fun things like that too.
All right. I love getting a window on your world. What drove you initially to go into labor and delivery? One of my dearest friends, her daughter, who happens to be one of my daughter's best friends, she's in nursing school right now. And there's something about her personality that I've said to her a couple of different times. Hey, I really think you should look at L&D, at labor and delivery. I think you'd be so good. And I have a couple of other friends who are midwives. It's one of those professions that I thought, I either want to deliver babies or I want to write books. And so I've ended up writing books, and then I've delivered a few of my own babies, but I'm not in that OBGYN or in that L&D format. So what was it for you that you thought, this is where I want to land with my degree, with my experience, with my career?
Yeah, so I've always worked with little ones, like worked in daycare for a good bit throughout college, just really enjoyed them, being around babies and moms and things like that. So when I went to nursing school, we have to work on floors of all kinds of units. So psych and geriatrics and all the things. And each one was just very much like I don't think so, And then we went to labor and delivery. I was like, I just feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. So I did a preceptorship there, and which is an internship for nurses, and just loved it and thought, I want to take care of women and babies. Like, I don't want anything to do with guys. I want to be with the women. And so started there and have stuck with it. Never did stray from it.
Right. That's just been your lane. What have you seen in the last 15 years? Because I have to tell you, with my oldest child to then when I had the twins, there's a 16 and a half year gap, if you will, between my oldest child and then having my twins. There were things that I've seen along the way that trended up, trended down, things that hospitals were doing that I thought were really great. And then I would go to have the next baby and there would be some different restrictions or some different, and I'd think, well, why are we doing this after the research that showed that? And so I've had quite a buffet of experiences when it comes to my own births. What have you seen in your tenure now over the last 15 that I haven't had window to because I haven't had a baby in the last 15, but what have you seen that you've seen trend up, trend down, greater awareness, things that you've gone, I wonder if we're going backwards? Tell me about a snapshot of what that looks like.
Yeah, so I would say that when I first started in nursing, we were really big on medical interventions, and some places still are. I feel like it takes us a little while to get a hold of the research to really move forward in that research. And so, it was women on their backs to labor or pushing on their backs. And we still see some of that to an extent, but there's so much more education now around positioning and, well, it's not great for women to labor on their backs. It actually can slow labor down and, these sorts of things we're learning. So I personally have seen the trend of a lot of medical interventions, a lot of managing birth and how that experience goes to now we are intervening when needed. Sometimes that is needed, but also just helping moms like, okay, how can I facilitate what you're doing? You feel good in this position. Okay, why don't we tweak it this way and see if that helps? It's just more of almost a partnership, it has seemed, which is great.
Right. I love seeing that because one of the things that was a surprise to me back a million years ago when I had my first, she would object to me saying she's a million years old. She's not a million years old. But when I had my first, one of the things that was kind of came as a shock to me, honestly, Rachel, I spent all this time researching who my doctor would be. I mean, put in some time to really make sure that I was aligned with this person, that they really understood the way I wanted to go about things. We really were simpatico. Then I went into labor and I realized, it's my labor and delivery nurse who really controls so much of my experience. So give the mom listening out there who is heading into birth, or give the grandma who is watching her daughter or daughter-in-law prepare for birth, how do you build relationship with that labor and delivery nurse? Because I have to tell you, I had some labor and delivery nurses who were, oh man, Rachel, they were incredible. They were absolutely amazing. And then I had one, I gotta be honest, she was a pistol, and it really could have ruined the experience. So what can you do when you arrive, you're in labor, it's time to have this baby, to develop relationship with that L&D nurse? And what are your rights as a patient if you're just not jiving with somebody to say, maybe I need to make a change here, even though I'm in active labor?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And you have the right to do that too. You want a good fit for, what you feel you need. You can always ask for the charge nurse. So if you get in a situation where you're like, this is just not going to work, but I don't want to be mean. I don't want conflict, all of that kind of thing. Just say, hey, can I speak to the charge nurse? They'll come in, you can explain everything, and she will quietly swap out nurses. I know that can feel really difficult and awkward too, but again, this is your birth. This is your birth. This is something you remember forever, Right. So we want you to have the nurse that you want as well. I would say too, that like the perspective of we are on the same team. So I know sometimes moms will come in and they'll have their birth plan, which is great. They'll be very like, here's what I have researched. Here's what I want to do. Sometimes that research is evidence-based. Sometimes it's not, because we have a lot of things going on social media now. As you know, all kinds of sources are cropping up that aren't great. And so coming in with an open mind too, and asking questions like, hey, why would we do this? Or why wouldn't we do this? And let's have a conversation. I think that's a great place to start, because automatically if we come in like, this is how we're doing it, this is what I'm doing kind of a thing, it puts up defenses right away. So I think we can avoid all that too with just that perspective of we're on the same team. Let's have some conversations. Let's ask some questions and figure out if this is a good fit or not.
I love hearing your perspective on that, because I think that we are doing a better job of teaching women to advocate for themselves as patients. I think that's great.
Yes.
And to have that perspective that, we're partnering here. We want healthy baby. We want healthy mom. We want a good experience. You're not going in, enemies out, this is,
right.
There are options. I think that's a really beautiful way of doing that. Now, yes, you are there for L&D and birth and all that good stuff, but there is an element to the experience of pregnancy that I'm excited to see that we're having more conversation about it. But I also still see where we're culturally rewarding those who don't seem to have this experience. And it's what you call in your new book, the fourth trimester, if you will, this place that there is healing, there is postpartum stuff to look out for. There's a whole world of health that happens after the baby comes. And yet so often we get so focused on the labor and delivery that we sort of forget about that part. So tell me when you started realizing, there is a need here to make sure we continue to educate ourselves about not just the first couple, 3-6 weeks after the baby's born, but the amount of time it really takes to heal after having a whole human being.
Right. Birthing a human. The first time that I really had the thought was after my first baby. So I was a nurse. I educated moms, did all the things, and had this thought, postpartum's going to be breezy. Like, haha, let's laugh at that. Postpartum's going to be an easy recovery. I know what to do. And so I got into it, and a few weeks in, I had this realization, this thought of like, oh my goodness, if I'm struggling this much, how do moms feel that don't have my background? They really don't have that kind of training. And I thought, this needs to change, because if anybody should have known, it should have been me. I should have known and realized that. And then just continuing to care for moms, over the years, and having them have this experience where they look at me before they go home and they say, can I just take you home with me? Or what do I do now? Who do I call if something goes wrong, or if I have questions like that, just feeling of being lost and really thrown out there, like, you're good, here's your baby, go home. And that was when I realized, there really is a missing resource that we need for this time, that new moms need for this time, where they're not left Googling at 3:00 in the morning for their answers,
Right. And that's where I think a lot of us end up. I was seeing something today that I thought was really powerful, where it said, hey, you want to know why women are Googling and on social media looking for answers to different health questions? Because unfortunately, a lot of times they're not getting that kind of care from the medical professionals that they're trusting. That's not to throw medical professionals under the bus. It's just to say, when you are left feeling like there are gaps, when you feel like I didn't know this was a potential, then you are kind of left on your own to figure some things out. I love that you have a new book. It's After Baby Comes: Physical, Spiritual, and Emotional Recovery for Postpartum Moms, based on your experience as a nurse with these years of experience in helping moms post-birth. What are some of the most distinctive gaps that you see? I understand it can be very individual, but what would you say are some common experiences where they hand you this baby? First of all, you feel like you are getting away with something, like a heist at the museum when they hand you this baby and they're like, take it home. And you're like, are we all sure this is okay? But what are some of the gaps that you've seen, not just with first-time moms, but moms in general, when we give that baby to them, we wheel them out to the car and say, be warm and be blessed? What are the gaps?
Right. Yes. I think breastfeeding's a huge one. So we have done a better job of getting lactation consultants in the hospital and training nurses to help with this. But a lot of moms go in thinking, well, breastfeeding is natural, so that means it's easy. And so many moms have struggled with breastfeeding. And when we have those expectations, and in all areas of postpartum, when we have these expectations of it's going to be this way, but it's not this way, it sets moms up to feel like they are failing or other moms are doing better than they are. And I think I see a big theme along those lines, even with the 6 weeks thing. We have that 6-week follow-up visit where the OB sees you for a few minutes and says, oh, you're good. Go back to your pre-pregnancy life. And you think, oh, okay, I must be good. Everything's okay. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. I still don't feel normal. I still feel disconnected from my body. I'm trying to jog and things don't feel the same. What is going on? All the things. And we just, and it's not the OB's fault. It's structure. There's just not a lot of structure for moms to really recover and get the healing that they need. But I hope those things are changing. I'm seeing some light that those things are changing.
Within that 4th trimester, one of the things that I'm very grateful we're seeing more conversation about, and yet I still think there's some confusion, is on postpartum depression. And of course, some of the ones that really hit the news are the ones that go all the way into postpartum psychosis, which is such a tragic thing. And we see some gaps there in terms of being identified as someone who's at risk for that extreme, but still there.
Yeah.
So tell me the difference between postpartum depression, just kind of generalized baby blues, when you need to be taking action, what your spouse should be looking for, or someone who's giving you care after birth. Give us just a little checklist of things that we need to be aware of when it comes to all those emotions and the crashing hormones and all the stuff that happens immediately following a birth.
Yes. So the first 3 weeks, we tend to recommend give it some time. First 3 weeks are a bit of a transition. Your hormones, like you said, they're crashing, they're rising, they're doing all of these things. And then plus the no sleep, you're just not getting a lot of sleep. Right. There's a lot going on during that time. So we call those first 3 weeks the baby blues. that women can experience the baby blues during that time. So the baby blues is not a disorder. It's important for moms to know that. This is just a normal kind of transition you can go through. Not all moms experience that, but a little over 80% do, according to research. So a good many will experience that. However, it tends to level out on its own. So it's kind of those, just, give it some time. It should get a little better on its own. If after that, the 3 weeks, that it doesn't get better or it starts getting a lot worse, that's when we start looking at postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. Postpartum psychosis tends to come a good bit down the road when postpartum depression or anxiety is untreated. So we want to avoid postpartum psychosis at all costs. And that part of that is helping moms when they need help, getting them the help that they need. So for postpartum anxiety, that usually comes before postpartum depression. So it's a good, spouses, husbands that are watching these wives, if they start seeing signs of anxiety, it's a good idea to go ahead and go, hey, let's call your OB doctor. Let's just make sure everything's looking okay. Maybe get you into a postpartum therapist just so you have some time to talk things through. That's always a great idea. So what postpartum anxiety looks like is typically intrusive thoughts that feel traumatizing. So intrusive thoughts come and go in postpartum. That can be normal. But when they begin to feel traumatizing, you can't shake them. You're feeling like that elephant on your chest kind of feeling. That's okay, postpartum anxiety. And then postpartum depression is really excessive worrying, can even be feeling numb. Like our moms that are just feeling, I don't care. Hey, do you want to go out to lunch? I don't care. That kind of thing is very much a sign of we're probably dealing with some postpartum depression and need a little help. And I think it's important too to let moms know, if your spouse comes to you concerned, not to just blow him off. So sometimes we don't see it first. They actually notice it first. Right. So if he were to come to them and say, hey, you don't seem like yourself. Can we call the OB? I just encourage moms, say yes. Don't say no. But of course, if she says no, he can call too. He's always allowed to call.
Right. It's probably one of the number one questions I get being a mom of 8 kids. And that question is, what on earth are y'all doing about college? And I can tell you, with 8 different kids, 8 different learning styles, 8 different ideas about what the kids want when it comes to their careers and all of the rest, college has been a big topic of conversation around here. Well, there is a university that I want you to know about because it just hits so many of the things that are really important when it comes to considering your kid's college education. George Fox University, it's the #1 private school in Oregon. It's a Christian university. It's located in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. And what's so great is in addition to a top-notch education, students have the opportunity to grow and deepen their faith. And they can learn in this really pivotal time in their lives who God made them to be. I mean, let's face it. We need more people coming out of our universities who know how to be leaders and how to be leaders with character. And George Fox University offers more than 60 academic majors. And that includes a nationally recognized engineering program, a nursing program. It allows your student to pursue their passions and prepare for the calling that God has for them. And let's not forget about fun when it comes to college. George Fox University students have a great student life. There are weekly campus events, there's chapel, there's service opportunities. There are 23 NCAA Division III athletic teams. Here's something that is important to me. There's a study abroad opportunity. So if your student wants to go and experience life somewhere else for a semester, they can do that. There's outdoor recreation because, of course, we're talking about Oregon, so gorgeous. George Fox University could be just the perfect fit for your student as you are looking into college, career, and all that goes beyond. George Fox University, where your student will learn and thrive in the center of it all. Now, I realize this predates postpartum depression, but I was sharing with you before we started recording that I've had some people in my life experience something that I didn't really, even after all these babies, Rachel, I didn't really realize was a thing. And I didn't realize it was happening as frequently as I now see some of the research revealing, which is depression during pregnancy,
Mm,
antepartum depression.
yeah.
What are you seeing in that way? I realize this is kind of a fresh area that we're taking a look at. And yet I was seeing stats of up to 10% of women experiencing this. And I don't know that we yet really know if how deep the connection goes between depression during pregnancy and then following pregnancy. But it
Right.
seems to me that that's an interesting area that there's a lot more to delve into and look into on that.
Yes, and our hormones play such a big role in all of this that it can be difficult because I would say antenatal depression could put a mom at risk for experiencing postpartum depression. We know that these things are kind of linked. We don't know a whole lot about it all, but we know it's linked. And then moms that experience depression before they get pregnant are more likely to experience it even during pregnancy or after, maybe even heightened.
Okay.
So that's a really good thing to watch for a mom who's ever experienced it, knowing, okay, I may be at risk for this, being aware of that. But yeah, that's really tough because sometimes it is just the way we respond to a hormone level in our bodies. Thankfully, there are things. I think a combined approach is great with depression. So not just medication, that can be very necessary at times, but also therapy. We know through research that combining those approaches are going to be best for helping moms.
Right. Talk me through what you see, because I've definitely had, all these births. I've had different experiences, and I've had friends who've had different experiences. And we all have that friend who says, yeah, I'd made dinner for my family and I had finished putting everything in the dishwasher and then I sneezed and I had this baby. And you're like, whatever. And then, if any of us have been through experiences that from a physical standpoint were very traumatic, even if the outcomes were good for baby, but the physical experiences were really intense or extreme. That to me seems like it would play a big role into what your experience is after the baby comes when it comes to
Yes.
birth trauma. And there are people who experience some really intense things. Obviously, this can be anything from my birth plan didn't go exactly the way I wanted to my doctor
Yeah.
wasn't on call to I have a friend who recently gave birth in the front yard. There's all kinds of different things that can happen. So talk to me
Right.
about birth trauma and the role that it plays in your experience once you've had the baby, after the baby comes.
Yes, so it can really play a big role there. To tack onto your story too, I've had moms I've taken care of that delivered in their car, didn't quite
Yep.
make it to the hospital. And it's so funny listening to stories like you said, because it's like, well, I felt contractions, but they weren't really painful or anything. And then this baby pops out. I just want to say to the moms listening, that's a very small percentage
Yeah.
of us that happens to. Most of us don't have births quite
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
not quite like that.
That's more abnormal. But yes, birth trauma or just unmet expectations of how you felt like your birth would go, unplanned C-sections. I've taken care of so many moms that had C-sections that just were not planning on that. All of that sets you up a little bit for emotions that you need to deal with, whether that's disappointment, grief. A lot of moms don't realize that they actually need to grieve because when you have an expectation and that doesn't go the way you thought, it's a loss, and they don't think of it as a loss typically, but usually there's a grief process that needs to happen for them to really heal from whatever it was they experienced. So sometimes moms that carry that and aren't aware, that they need that extra emotional help, they go into postpartum automatically already with some ticks against them, of setting up just for some more failed expectations, some more disappointment and grief and things like that. So it can definitely put them on a path of, okay, we may need a little extra love and empathy and encouragement and healing for these moms.
Right. I remember with my twins, my babies 7 and 8, you would have thought, and if I showed you the pictures, you'd think surely that girl was ready for those babies to be born. But my doctor decided in the interest of their health, we went on and delivered I didn't have a C-section, but we went on, delivered the babies at like 35 weeks and 5 days. And it was sort of a surprise. I went in this one morning and she said, baby A is measuring bigger than baby B. I think we should go on and do this. I'm on call. Let's do it. And I remember distinctly getting home, as huge as I was in that pregnancy. I just wasn't ready. I had not hit that point that I think we naturally hit sometimes in our bodies of going, eviction notice. Like, I just need you to I need you to hop on out. And kind of scolding myself a little bit, Rachel, thinking these babies are here. Everything's fine. Why am I responding this way? But it did feel a little bit like a loss because I just wasn't ready yet. I knew it was likely it was my last pregnancy, and I just wasn't quite ready for that pregnancy to be over. So I'm glad that you bring that up because I think it does really play a role, even if it's more minimal in terms of the physical impact. Just when things don't go quite as how we thought they might, there is a loss there. That's a very fair thing to say. Talk to me about those 6 weeks after. I know a lot of spouses who are like, is it 6 weeks yet? Is it 6 weeks yet? Like, can we get back to, if you will? And mom, if you don't have headphones in, I'm going to use code here in case we're in the carpool line. But, are we back to regular programming? And so is 6 weeks, I just feel like that's a generalization and we need to be cautious about putting a lot of expectation and pressure on women, depending on what all has happened. And at the same time, does it always have to be 6 weeks? What if somebody's like, it's been 3 weeks and I'm feeling good? So what do you see?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm so glad you brought this up because this is a huge topic, with my first baby, I had always heard 6 weeks, 6 weeks and you're back to normal. And my OB was a great OB and she did me a favor. She said, now, Rachel, 6 weeks is not a magic number and it doesn't mean you're going to feel like your pre-pregnancy self or be ready or a tigress or anything like that. It just simply means it's safe. You're not going to hurt anything. And I was so thankful she had given me that advice, or else I would have thought something was wrong with me. Because I later found out that when you have a tear or an episiotomy, which over 80% of first-time moms experience that, it actually can take months not to feel sore with the stuff, and for some moms that have severe tears or episiotomies, it can take a year for them actually not to feel sore. So it is definitely not 6 weeks and back to normal. It can be a journey for sure. I would say I would be cautious about trying before 6 weeks, even if you didn't have a tear, even if you had a C-section, something like that. The reason we give that 6 week, that number there, is that after you birth your baby, you birth your placenta, you do have a dinner plate-sized wound in your uterus. Now that shrinks as your uterus continues to shrink. It gets smaller and smaller. But you have a wound, and so we don't want things there or anything that could introduce infection into that wound because ouch, right? And then if your cervix dilated at all, it actually takes several weeks for that to close completely again. So there's just a lot going on those first few weeks. I know, we've definitely had babies come back and be, mamas be pregnant again, having their second babies in 9 months, to the day. But I would encourage you to give yourself 6 weeks. And then there's some moms, that they do not feel ready at 6 weeks. And it's your body. I think it's important really to keep that communication open with your spouse and, hey, this is what's going on, because sometimes they will take it as rejection, towards them, and just knowing and encouraging them, like, it's not rejection. It's not that I don't want to be with you. It's that my body is still healing, because they've also heard 6 weeks, and back to normal.
Yeah. And clocked that on the calendar.
Right. Yes.
Rachel, I think too, there's something that we do to postpartum moms that probably is a little unfair. I can remember after having my first baby, first of all, lots of attention because she was the first grandbaby on both sides. It was my first baby. I'm the oldest child. So, and my husband's the oldest child also. So there was a lot of attention, a lot of care that was given to us. And we had great support, great community, great family. There's something that I think we do, though, that a lot of us do when it comes to second baby, third baby, fourth baby. You're like, oh, you got this. You're a seasoned veteran mom, and the level of care and attention that you might need, whatever. And yet, I know that the fatigue and the plates you are spinning when it comes to having that second, third, fourth child, and your body is now older, and in many ways it's conditioned to do this. It's not as much of a shock to the system,
Yeah.
but that recovery cycle is still significant. And I think a lot of times culturally, we don't seem to see that there is still postpartum care. I think about cultures in which a postpartum mom, regardless of the number of child that she's on,
Mm-hmm.
they're, 40 days before you go out and see people, this many days in bed. The
Yes.
the mother-in-law comes for this amount of time and kind of waits on you hand and foot. And yet, for some reason, culturally here in the West, we just blaze past a lot of that
Yeah.
cultural norm that other families, other places, it's just part of what you do to support a woman. So, particularly for women here in the US, how do we set up, particularly if we have more than one baby, care systems, things that we know we're going to need postpartum in a culture that's not necessarily trying to, minimize what we've been through, but may just not be paying attention in the same way that
Right.
other cultures might?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a big question, right? Because that's so true, and then moms a lot of times will deal with guilt because it's like, well, I had my first baby and there was all this attention for my first baby. And now I can hardly give attention to these other babies, because
Yeah.
I'm running around like crazy. There's so many just layers to that. But I think it's really important for moms to know too that you need to ask for help and support. I've found so many, myself included, that we assume people are just going to know. They're just going to know how to help us. They're just going to know that we need help. They're going to see us. And so often it's not true, which I know it sounds really sad, but they're not in our minds. They're not in our hearts. So they're not seeing and feeling the things that we are. So it's tough for new moms to kind of get out there and take a risk and be vulnerable and say, hey, I need help with this. Or for the first 2 weeks, could you help me with this? But it's so important for us to actually get that support we need, because most of us have people in our lives that would be willing to help, but maybe they're not going to take the initiative, or they're going to feel like they're overstepping if they just step in. So I think it's really important that we know we need to ask.
And, I find too, Rachel, and maybe you see this as well, that particularly in the way that we're all trying to put more emotional intelligence into our relationships, we're trying to honor personal boundaries more. This place of asking for permission and reaching out and asking for help, I think is so important because I think a lot of us are not wanting to overstep. We're not wanting to
Right.
insert ourselves in ways in which we wouldn't seem welcome. Whereas when I think about previous generations, the matriarch of the family could just elbow her way in and here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to take care of you. And that's not where we're at as a culture
Mhm.
anymore, which puts a lot of pressure. I think there are good things about that. But it does put a lot of pressure on those new parents, on that new
Yeah.
mom, to be responsible for asking. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Well, Rachel, the new book, I'm so excited for you. After
Thank
Baby
you.
Comes, Physical, Spiritual, and Emotional Recovery for Postpartum Moms. Where can the listener go to find the book, find more from you, all the good stuff?
Yeah, so Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Books A Million, ChristianBook.com, all have the book ready to go. I have a website, mamadidit.com, where I have lots of resources, free. I do consulting and classes and things like that. Moms can go. And there's also blogs there, so lots of free evidence-based stuff as well. And then I'm on Instagram at Mama Did It Official too. I post a lot of helpful things. So any of those places, I'm there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for updating us and equipping us from the point of view that you have a unique point of view of helping so many moms bring babies into the world and caring for them afterward. I really appreciate the work you do and your heart and your generosity toward women. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, listener, you know the drill. Rebecca puts together show notes. You can go there and find all the links and resources that Rachel is sharing with us today. And we love for you to check out AllMomDoes.com. AllMomDoes on the socials, a great community for women in all walks of life, whether you are expecting your first baby and this has just been right in the center of your target, or you've just found out that you're about to be a grandma and you are ready to equip yourself to be the best kind of help and support that you can be. We're here for you, whatever your season of life. I love to interact with you too. Julie Lyles Carr, all the places. I hang out mainly on Instagram. We want to hear from you, the questions, the topics, the guests that you are most interested in. So be sure and reach out to me. Just get over to the DMs and let me know what you're thinking. And I will see you next time on the All Mom Does podcast.
Thanks for listening. We just wanted to take a minute to let you know that just like you and your family, Purposely is also part of a family, the Krista Family of Ministries. Krista helps kids and teens learn and grow in their faith at King Schools and Miracle Ranch Camp. And Krista shares Jesus with people in the poorest, most remote places through World Concern. Krista Senior Living is a community of love and care, and Krista Media is a place of hope on the radio. God is changing lives through these 5 ministries, and Krista is on mission to share the good news of Jesus. To learn more, visit Krista.org.